Hello everybody, it's Joel again. What am I going to do today? Well, I've been looking up some of those Aether Drift spoilers, brand new, really cool set I'm excited for. We actually did get a new Lotus, which is pretty awesome. So what I thought I would do today, spoiler alert, I'm going to be looking at every Lotus card that is legal in Commander. So no Black Lotus, no Black Lotus. So I'm going to go alphabetically. That means the first one we're starting with today is Gilded Lotus. This is actually a mana rock, and I have talked about it before. It costs 5 mana, and it taps to add 3 mana of any one color. So, a really excellent mana rock. In the decks where you want to have like sort of that mid-range mana rocks, normally I'd say mana rocks are better early because you can ramp out. This one's more of a burst of mana, like mid to late game. So if you're playing a deck where you really want to have a lot of mana and you kind of maybe care about artifacts a little bit, like this is a really good card. So yeah, pretty simple card to start off with. All these are going to be reasonably easy to understand. And I think Gilded Lotus is a really good card. I have it in, I believe, 2 of my decks. I like this card a lot. It is pretty old school. It's starting to get a bit power crept though, because it's like 5 mana, but a lot of decks can do a lot more for 5 mana these days than just, make 3 mana every turn, but yeah, it's really excellent. I think it's quite nice. Okay, so I did say I was going to do only cards that are legal in Commander, but I actually do want to talk about Jeweled Lotus, because this is like a card that was made for Commander, and it's banned in Commander now. I'm not really going to get too deep on the bannings necessarily, because people get really vitriolic talking about them. I'm kind of just a whatever sort of guy. Jeweled Lotus, I did only play it in one deck I've ever played it in, and I don't have that deck anymore. So this card I don't really have a super good experience with. I do have a guy in my playgroup that always played this, and he would get, I swear, every game he would get shielded out turn 1. So I just, it's a Black Lotus that you can spend a mana to cast your Commander. So it's pretty easy to understand. When this card came out in Commander Legends, freaking people freaked out about it. I mean, rightfully so. This card's really freaking strong. It is. It's incredibly strong. It's kind of only really good in like specific decks though. Yeah, any deck can play it. Any deck that wants to get their Commander out, sure. But, some decks want their Commander a bit more than others, I would say. And this card just pushed some decks over the top, I think. Every time I saw this card in the game, we were all kind of just like, okay, we're going to go and fight that player with the Jeweled Lotus start now. I didn't ever see it like get looped or anything. It can be. It's another bonus to the card. So there's a possibility, like if it was still legal, I could play it in like some of my decks. Yeah, it's an excellent looking card. Very, very pretty artwork. Very nice artwork. In fact, all of these have incredible artwork. Yeah, so this card, banned in Commander, can't see it anymore unless your play group is okay with it. I probably would be fine with it. It's really strong, but I don't really play CDH or, even the games when it was turn 1 shielded, it was just like, oh, it's a Jeweled Lotus game, okay, cool. And I got another game lined up, and it's just good. There's nothing really overly to say about it. It's just a good card. It went in a lot of decks. It made a lot of people mad when it got banned. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I like it. I think it's cool. I actually think it's a lot cooler than people think it is. It's like one of those things that they're like, oh, it's a lame card. It can lead to some interesting moments, but I think overall it's pretty exciting when it comes down. Like a Soul Ring, right? It's just exciting burst of mana. Just one of those things for the format. People are like not going to have a good time with it sometimes, but yeah, I don't know. I always try and think of it as being exciting, so yeah. Next card we're getting to is Lotus Bloom, and this one's literally a Black Lotus. It doesn't cost anything, and you sack it for 3 mana of any one color. But there's a bit of a caveat to this one. You actually have to suspend it. You can't cast it from your hand. It does cost 0 to suspend, but you got to wait a few turns with it, or you just do what I do with it in my Tameshi deck and just reanimate it. It's a little niche. I think you could probably get away with trying to play it in any deck, but it's just a card that you're just going to use for mana. You almost would rather just a regular mana rock that's going to get you mana the next turn, and it's going to produce mana the whole game, right? So this is a bit more specific. yeah, I think this is a card that's best in decks where you want to be sacrificing, or perhaps you want to reanimate this, or maybe you care about time counters, any of those three. But it's not like it's impossible to play in a normal deck as well, right? So pretty excellent card overall, I think. Okay, coming up to Lotus Blossom now, and I've played this card before as well, and I've got a funny story about this card I'll get to in a minute. What does this do? It costs 2 mana, it's an artifact, and at the beginning of your upkeep you get a petal counter on the Lotus Blossom, and then you can crack it to add a mana of any color per the amount of petal counters that are on it. I'll just get this story out of the way that I have with this card. I used to play this in Farid. I used to have an old border one of this, and one time I was playing on Spell Table Magic, and I used my phone as my webcam to point down at my playmat when I play on Spell Table, and my phone fell out of my little mount thing that I have for it right onto my copy of Lotus Blossom. So my Lotus Blossom has this dirty big dent in it right now from my phone landing on it. So it made for a pretty funny story, and I still have the card to show for it too. Here we are, I found it. It's still in the same sleeve that when I dropped my phone on it too. So I'm trying to hold my microphone and do this as well. If I pull this out, yep, it's still got the dent on it, alright. It's a bit hard to see, but it's on the left, just about where the border is, about where the flower lotus is on the left there. I don't know if you guys can see it. Well, yeah, very, very dented. It is probably possible to still play it. You can see it better on the sleeve, just about. See that dent? I don't know if you guys can see it. Anyway, pretty funny story about this card. Is this card actually good? Yeah, I think it's pretty good. It's really slow. Don't get me wrong. It is pretty slow. That was one of the things I noticed when I was playing it in that deck was, dang, it's slow. You can kind of like play this on turn 2, and then next turn if you want to use it, it'll have 1, so it's kind of like a 2 mana rock, but you have a one-time use of it. This is pretty good. Maybe if you're proliferating counters, you could get perhaps some pretty good mana out of this. But again, it's more of a ritual. Even if you reanimate this, you still have to go through the motions of getting the counters again, so it's not like great for that. You know, I think it's a pretty decent card. Again, it doesn't go in every deck, and it went okay in my sacrifice deck until, you know, I dropped my phone on my copy and kind of wrecked it. But, you know, these things happen. Alrighty, I guess I could probably do this one. Lotus Cobra. So, yeah, alright, cool, Lotus card, sure. So this one's a 2 mana, you guys have probably seen this card before, 2 mana 2/1 snake, and it's got this ability Landfall. When a land enters your battlefield, you get a mana of any color. This is kind of like a mana dork, but it has an upside of if you're playing fetch lands, it's extra good. You just play it, it just produces you mana of any color, which is actually really good. If it was like only green mana or something, it wouldn't be half as good. It's excellent. It's a really good card. It's, you know, it sees play in a lot of decks, no wonder it's, you know, very popular. It's very good. So, you know, Lotus card, Lotus Cobra, it's close enough, right? Yeah, Lotus card, cool, pretty good card. Okay, cool. We're getting up to Lotus Field now. This is actually a land, the first land we got here. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you have to sacrifice 2 lands. It taps for 3 mana of any one color, and it has hexproof. This is good in a couple of scenarios. The main one I can think of is if you're untapping lands. The other thing that I've seen this card be really useful for is in white decks where you want that catch-up ramp to work, because this like reduces the number of lands you control, but you sort of keep the same amount of mana. So say if you sack 2 planes with this, this could be your land drop, but this taps for 3, so you kind of offset the planes that you sacrificed a little bit, but now you're down lands technically, so your catch-up ramp can work. In fact, I think that's probably the best use for this that I've seen, apart from if you want to untap it. It has hexproof, so perhaps if you're like animating lands, it might be good to have a land with protection. Also in a deck where perhaps you want to sacrifice lands, or you want to reanimate lands, or you want lands in your graveyard, Maybe you can play lands out of your graveyard with like a Ramen Up Excavator. You do kind of have to have a use for it outside of it just being a land. It's a little bit specific, and if you don't use it for anything that it can do good, it has a little bit of a downside, but if you've got any way to make use of this card, it's really good. I forgot about this card, hey. Lotus Guardian. This is actually a really infamous one. I like this one. This card is so bad. This is a 7 mana, 4/4 flying dragon. Wait for it. You know what it does? It taps for mana of any color. Okay, literally think about this compared to like Ornithopter of Paradise. Ornithopter of Paradise is a 2 mana 0/2 flyer that does the exact same thing. Yeah, I don't need to really explain this too much. It's very funny. It's funny. It's pretty bad though. I don't think anyone with half a brain is going to want to play this except for in, you know, meme decks where the point is to play bad cards. Maybe I should play this in Frid just to screw with people a little bit. Oh my gosh. It's okay. Even think about if this just tapped for 3 mana like a Gilded Lotus, it would still be bad. It taps for 1 mana. Oh, it's all kinds of wrong. It's funny. It is very funny. I like this card though. I think it's really interestingly and funny. It's bad and it's just, yeah, it's the reason why people know about it for being infamous. But if you've never seen it before, there you go. Funny card. Okay, coming up to the next one, Lotus Petal. This one's really simple. It costs 0 and you crack it and you add 1 mana of any color. Okay, so this card is really good, but I don't think it's actually very good in like most scenarios. It's 1 mana ritual. And rituals aren't even like that good. They just turbo out something a little bit quicker. Like into like an arch enemy position, like you make yourself a little bit of a target. But this isn't even like you make yourself a target like that strong. You could get your... I think the best thing to do with this card is to get a 2 mana commander out on turn 1. Like Skullbriar. If you get Skullbriar out on turn 1 with this, it's pretty cool. This obviously is mana of any color as well, so it is good fixing for like a 2 mana commander. This gets played in CDH most, I imagine, because it's a ritual and it's free mana for a card in your hand. In most casual commander games though, it's pretty much not worth it to just sack a card in your hand for 1 mana. So don't get me wrong, it's a good card, but you know, most decks do not want this card really. You want to have specific like reasons why you would use it. Pretty good card, just not like the best in casual necessarily. Ooh, cool card. This is actually a newer one too, so I get to talk about it. This one's called Lotus Ring. It's actually an equipment. It costs 3 mana. It equips for 3, and the equipped creature gets +3/+3, and also has the Vigilance ability. Also, another ability to tap and sacrifice the creature and add 3 mana of any one color. This is a bit strange because this is not really like a mana positive sort of effect. This is, you pay 3 to equip it onto something, and then you sack the creature, and then you add 3. I think the best thing about this card is that it's a sacrifice outlet, right? Yeah, you just sort of pay 3 and you equip it onto something, and then you sack it for 3 mana. So you're not really down any mana, it's kind of just a free sacrifice. I think this is pretty niche. This was a little bit hyped up when it got revealed, I'm pretty sure. But it's niche. You kind of really want the sacrifice, I think. Or the fact that it's an equipment, maybe you could tutor for it or something. Or the other thing is maybe you could equip it for free. Maybe your commander, like an Arden, right? Arden equips all equipment for free on combat. So this could be pretty good for that if you have some extra like tokens or whatever lying around that you could potentially use this to make mana. You would need some specific cards to do that though. So very cool card. Very niche card though. This is not going to go in a lot of decks, I think, but again, in decks where you want to sacrifice stuff, or decks where perhaps you want equipment. This is also indestructible. I don't know if I mentioned that. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can do something with that. I'm not sure, but yeah, pretty cool card. I like it a lot. This is another land. This is the older version of Lotus Field. This is Lotus Vale. Well, the current wording is it's a land and it just taps to add 3 mana of any one color. And what this does is, if it would enter the battlefield, you have to sacrifice 2 untapped lands instead. If you do, you put Lotus Vale onto the battlefield. If you don't, you put it into its owner's graveyard. So it's kind of just a weird way to say that when it enters the battlefield, you have to sacrifice 2 lands. So again, all the same uses of if you want lands in your graveyard, if you want to untap this land, if you want to sacrifice lands, if you want to sacrifice permanents, or so it's similar use cases to Lotus Field. So pretty good card. Again, in decks where maybe you like those white catch-up ramp decks where you want to have less lands than people. It's another good option for that, and I've seen it used in those sort of decks as well. Yeah, not much else I have to say about it. It's pretty good card. We're getting to Nyx Lotus now, 4 mana legendary artifact actually. None of these have been legendary so far as I know. It enters tapped, and also when you tap it, you add a mana of a color that you choose equal to your devotion to that color. It's interesting because it's kind of like, it can be really bad, but it can be really good as well. What you really want with this is at least 2 mana. So maybe if your commander costs has at least 2 pips, for example. If you start getting 3 or more mana out of it, that's excellent. That's a very good card. But I've seen this card get like 8 mana. I don't know, like a Phyrexian Obliterator and like a, I don't know, like a Necropotence, and then boom, you've got 7 mana right there. Like this card can be pretty stupid in the right decks. Pretty much only monocolor decks. I don't really know the use case of where you would play this as like a rock in a 2-color deck. So it's pretty niche that I would consider this outside of a monocolor deck. But yeah, it's pretty good. Again, the decks that want this really love it. Really want it. It can produce a shocking amount of mana. It's awesome. Very cool card. This is another one that was very hype when it got revealed. Yeah, I don't really know why you kind of wouldn't play this in a 5-color deck, I guess. The only bad thing about this is it enters tapped. It just taps for 5 every turn. And it's also all of your colors if you're in 5-color, because you're only able to play this in 5-color. This is very like consistent card, whereas like something like a Nyx Lotus, you have the potential to produce a lot of mana. This kind of just always produces a lot of mana. I don't really think there's a lot to say about this. I love the artwork. I do. I really like the artwork. The fact that this is legendary, I didn't mention this with Nyx Lotus, but legendary cards have a bit more support now. I got no complaints about this card, really. I think, again, any 5-color deck would love to have this, 100%. Alrighty, so we're getting to the last one today. This wasn't in alphabetical order, but I did want to save this one till last because this is the new one that I was talking about earlier from Aether Drift. This one's called Radiant Lotus. I'm sure people have been talking about this one already. This is a 6-mana. I haven't really properly read this card. And this is a 6-mana artifact. It has this ability. Tap, sacrifice 1 or more artifacts. Choose a color. Target player adds 3 mana of the chosen color for each artifact sacrificed this way. Okay, so if you're going to sacrifice 1 artifact per turn with this, you're just getting 3 mana each turn. That's a Gilded Lotus, so ideally you want to sacrifice 2 artifacts per turn. This is actually pretty hungry for artifact fodder, and believe me, I'm the artifact fodder guy. I have about 20 different artifact decks. I'm kidding. I don't have 20, but a few. Wow, the artwork is completely gorgeous. This is completely bananas in like clue decks and food decks and treasure decks and blood decks. Could you imagine sacrificing 5 artifacts with this? You get 15 mana. This is a huge sack outlet for artifacts. This is an artifact sack outlet. That's a really good one too. It produces a lot of mana. I quite like this card. It is very hungry, like I said. It's incredibly hungry for fodder. You're going to need to be in a very specific deck where you have a lot of artifacts. That could be a treasure deck. It could be like a clue deck, like I was saying. I'm quite excited to see this one in action, actually. In a deck where this is going to be really good, you're going to really notice how strong this card is. Again, someone's going to sacrifice like 10 clues to this to make 30 mana and then pump it into like an X spell, or like 30 more of their clues that they have and just sack them all to draw cards. I think in clue decks it might be the best for that reason, because you can sack a few of your clues to pay for mana to sack more clues to draw cards. Or in decks where you kind of maybe have mana sinks or something. Very, very nice card. Very cool card. And that's going to end us off for today. So that was all of the, I missed a few Lotuses, like the ones that weren't legal in Commander, except for like Jeweled Lotus, because I kind of wanted to talk about that, because it's like borderline legal. Like, I would be fine if people played it because they've been playing it for like a few years and I have been fine with it the whole time, but now technically it's banned, but we don't talk about that. But yeah, I went over like pretty much all the Lotuses that I wanted to talk about. So, you know, in honor of Radiant Lotus, the new one, cool. I've quite enjoyed talking about all these Lotuses. So yeah, that's going to be it for me today. I will see you guys in the next video.